Have you noticed something unusual happening in the modern world? The wisest, most disciplined, and inwardly awake people are quietly disappearing from society. Not in a dramatic storm of anger, not with grand speeches or loud protests, but with silence, restraint, and almost invisible resolve. They are leaving social media, stepping away from shallow friendships, walking away from endless debates, even turning down high-paying careers. These aren't acts of rebellion, they are acts of stoic necessity. Marcus Aurelius once wrote in his Meditations, "Withdraw into yourself. The rational principle that rules has this nature, that it is content with itself when it does what is just." In other words, when a person awakens to true Stoic consciousness, society often begins to feel like noise, distraction, even suffocation. This is not arrogance, but clarity. And once you see things as they are, you can never unsee them. Think about this. The modern world thrives on distraction. Politicians profit from outrage. Social media feeds on envy. Advertisers survive on your dissatisfaction. The system depends on keeping you emotionally reactive, constantly chasing shadows. Seneca warned about this almost 2,000 years ago when he said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." To a stoically awake mind, society is precisely that, an endless drain on life's most precious resource, time. And here lies the paradox. The more you grow in Stoic wisdom, the less capable you become of tolerating a world addicted to vanity, anger, and shallow pursuits. You feel like Epictetus's free man among slaves, aware of the chains everyone else mistakes for jewelry. And the result? Withdrawal, quiet disappearance. The soul choosing to preserve its reason rather than bleed it out through endless compromise. Now here's where curiosity must grip you. Why does this happen? Why do people who cultivate self-mastery, who learn to control their passions, who find freedom in discipline, suddenly feel the need to step away from the very society they once lived in? The easy answer would be to call it escapism, but that is exactly what it is not. Escapism runs away from life out of fear. Stoic withdrawal steps back out of wisdom. The difference is everything. It is not about hiding from pain, but about refusing to let trivialities pollute the mind that has finally tasted tranquility. Imagine being in a room where everyone is arguing in a language you no longer understand, throwing insults, demanding sides. To stay is to betray yourself, to pretend you do not see the futility. And so you step back, not from weakness, but from alignment with truth. Marcus Aurelius himself lived in the center of power, the emperor of Rome, surrounded by politics, flattery, and scheming. Yet in his private writings, he constantly longed for simplicity, for withdrawal into nature, for a life free from the masks others demanded of him. He could not leave his position, but he teaches us why many stoically awake people today do, because the soul suffocates when forced to perform roles that contradict reason. This is why they leave careers that demand lies, relationships built on masks, and communities drowning in pettiness. Their disappearance is not an act of desertion, but of survival, the survival of virtue, integrity, and inner peace. But here's the loop I want you to hold on to. What if this quiet exodus isn't just personal? What if it is a sign of something larger, something society itself refuses to confront? If those with clarity are vanishing, what does that say about the collective noise they are leaving behind? As Seneca asked, what is the point of having countless books and countless teachers if they keep you restless rather than bring you peace? In the same way, what is the point of society if its brightest minds, its calmest spirits, its most disciplined souls can no longer endure it? I'll show you exactly why stoically awake people are stepping away. Not out of selfishness, but because the cost of staying is nothing less than the betrayal of their reason, their freedom, and their very soul. To understand why stoically awake people are disappearing, we need to examine the nature of society itself. Society, as it operates today, thrives on what Epictetus would have called false judgments. People mistake wealth for happiness, status for virtue, pleasure for freedom. Yet the Stoics remind us that none of these things are good or bad in themselves. They are indifferent. What truly matters is how we use them, whether with virtue or vice. But modern society doesn't just misuse them, it builds its entire identity upon them. The moment a Stoic-minded individual sees through this illusion, participation becomes almost impossible. To continue playing along feels like a betrayal of reason. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live according to nature." And what could be more unnatural than spending your life chained to the false standards of a restless crowd? Consider this story. A man works tirelessly at a corporate job. He tells himself he is ambitious, providing for his family, contributing to society. Yet inside, he feels chained. Every meeting requires him to flatter egos. Every decision demands compromise of integrity. One day, after years of reading Seneca, he realizes the truth. He is not living. He is performing. He is acting the role of successful professional, but his soul is starving. And so, quietly, he leaves. His colleagues whisper that he is irresponsible, that he has wasted his potential. But in truth, he is finally aligned with Stoic wisdom. For as Epictetus taught, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. What looks like retreat to the world is in fact victory to the soul. This is the heart of the Exodus. Stoically awake individuals reach a breaking point where maintaining appearances feels like slow death. They have faced the truth of impermanence, the inevitability of loss, the futility of vanity. They have trained themselves not to be slaves of passions, and so the passions of the crowd no longer entice them. To argue in endless political debates, to scroll for hours in search of validation, to chase promotions that cost their peace, these things become intolerable. But here's the paradox you must not miss. The more awake they become, the less society understands them. To their peers, they appear antisocial, aloof, even arrogant. But in reality, they are simply unable to continue in a game they now see as meaningless. Seneca described this tension beautifully. He said, "The greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, which hangs upon tomorrow and loses today. You are arranging what lies in fortune's control and abandoning what lies in yours." The awakened Stoic sees that most people live in this exact state, always waiting, never living. To stay immersed in that crowd is to constantly pretend that the illusions still hold power. But once the illusion breaks, the mask cannot be worn again. And so, rather than wasting their strength resisting the tide, the stoically awake step out of the water altogether. They choose solitude, simplicity, and clarity, even if it means society will label them failures. But pause for a moment, because this raises a deeper question. If the Stoic life is about engagement with virtue, about living in accordance with nature, why then does it sometimes lead to withdrawal? Isn't that a contradiction? This is where the wisdom of Marcus Aurelius comes back to guide us. He never abandoned Rome, but in his writings he reveals the truth. Withdrawal is not always physical. Sometimes it is internal, a retreat into reason, into the inner citadel. Yet for many in today's world, external withdrawal becomes necessary because the noise of the collective drowns out the voice of reason. To guard the citadel, they must build walls of solitude. And here lies the next loop that must hold you. This disappearance is not permanent. It is not the end of participation, but a transformation of it. The stoically awake are not fleeing society forever. They are stepping back to return differently, stronger, clearer, unshakable. As Epictetus warned, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Withdrawal is not the end of action. It is the preparation for right action. Stay with me, because in the next section we'll explore the hidden cost of staying in society while awake, the psychological fatigue, the erosion of virtue, the betrayal of the self. And once you see this cost, you will understand why disappearance is not just a choice, but often the only path for those who seek true Stoic freedom. Imagine standing in a crowded marketplace, noise echoing from every direction, people arguing, sellers shouting, gossip spreading like wildfire. Now imagine trying to practice Stoic clarity in that environment every single day. This is the modern condition of the stoically awake individual, surrounded by distractions that demand reactions. Every social media post is a temptation to envy. Every political debate is a lure into anger. Every advertisement whispers that you are incomplete. The awakened Stoic sees these forces clearly for what they are, traps designed to enslave the mind. And here lies the problem. Remaining in such an environment requires constant labor. Seneca called this the exhaustion of living among the restless, saying, "Associate with those who will make a better man of you. Welcome those whom you yourself can improve. The process is mutual, for men learn while they teach." But what if your environment teaches only vice, distraction, and noise? Then every interaction becomes a battle, every day a drain on your strength. This is why Marcus Aurelius spoke of the inner citadel. In Meditations, he reminds himself, people exist for the sake of one another. Teach them or bear with them. Yet he also cautioned himself to withdraw inward whenever the world grew unbearable, to take refuge in reason and the eternal laws of nature. The stoically awake today are discovering that modern society often asks too much energy simply to bear with it. To stay immersed is to constantly translate between the depth of reason and the surface of noise. It is like swimming upstream against a river of unconscious passions. Sooner or later, fatigue sets in. And fatigue is not neutral. Fatigue erodes virtue. It turns patience into irritation, compassion into cynicism, reason into bitterness. The awake person must ask, at what cost am I staying? Here is a story that makes this real. A woman deeply trained in Stoic practice works as a teacher. She begins each morning with meditation on impermanence, reminding herself to meet her students with patience and calm. But day after day, she faces parents obsessed with grades, students absorbed in gossip, colleagues drowning in office politics. At first she endures, but slowly she notices a shift. She is no longer meeting foolishness with calm, but with quiet resentment. She is no longer teaching from virtue, but from fatigue. One night, reading Marcus Aurelius, she stumbles on his reminder. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. And she realizes her true obstacle is not her students, but the environment draining her soul. Within months, she withdraws from the profession, not out of hatred, but to preserve the Stoic clarity she has spent years cultivating. This is the psychological price of remaining in environments hostile to reason. Every day becomes invisible labor. You must resist anger when surrounded by outrage. You must resist envy when surrounded by vanity. You must resist despair when surrounded by constant complaints. To the unconscious, this feels normal. They are swept along with the current. To the conscious, it feels like slow suffocation. And the Stoics remind us, to betray your reason is worse than death. Epictetus declared, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows." The awakened see that society believes it already knows the good, the true, the just, and yet it lives in constant contradiction. To keep pretending otherwise is to betray your own vision. Here's the paradox worth holding. Stoic withdrawal is not about abandoning humanity. It is about refusing to be consumed by its unconsciousness. It is choosing not to pour the hard-earned tranquility of the soul into bottomless wells of distraction. And this is where fatigue becomes revelation. The awakened realize that what looks like sickness, burnout, depression, frustration, is often nothing more than the body's wisdom, signaling that the cost of staying has exceeded the value of belonging. To ignore this is to betray both body and soul. But here's where curiosity must sharpen. If disappearance is a necessity, what is its purpose? Are stoically awake people simply leaving to hide forever? Or is there something deeper taking place in their solitude? In the next section, we'll uncover how this withdrawal is not an escape, but a preparation, a hermit's phase where wisdom deepens, virtue strengthens, and a new form of contribution is born. Stay with me, because the answer will show you why disappearance is not weakness, but the foundation of the Stoic path itself. So what truly happens when stoically awake people withdraw? At first glance, it may look like defeat. They leave careers, friendships, and even social platforms that once gave them identity. Outsiders whisper that they have given up, but this is a surface judgment. The truth is far more profound. Withdrawal, in Stoicism, is not an end but a transformation. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself of the value of retreat. Men seek retreats for themselves, in the country, by the sea, in the mountains. And you too are wont to desire such things very much. But this is altogether a mark of the most common sort of men, for it is in your power whenever you choose to retreat into yourself. Withdrawal, then, is the deliberate movement inward, not away from life, but toward the deepest alignment with it. The stoically awake person steps back to strengthen their inner citadel, so they may return with greater clarity. Think of it like the blacksmith's forge. The blade must leave the battle and be placed in fire, hammered and cooled before it can return sharper. In the same way, those who withdraw are not fleeing, they are sharpening. Seneca, who often retreated to solitude, explained, "I never spend a day in idleness. Whenever I have withdrawn, I am busy with myself." This is what modern society misunderstands. The disappearance is not laziness or escapism. It is labor of the highest order, the labor of self-mastery. To outsiders, it looks passive. To the Stoic, it is the most active, most vital work, the training of the soul. Take the example of a man who left a high-powered finance career after years of Stoic study. His peers mocked him, saying he had wasted his potential. Yet in solitude, he began writing, not for profit, not for fame, but to refine his thoughts on virtue and reason. Years later, his writings became a source of wisdom for thousands, though he had no intention of fame. His withdrawal gave him the space to become something society could never have shaped him into. This echoes Epictetus's command: first learn the meaning of what you say, and then speak. Withdrawal is the school in which true meaning is forged. But there is another reason why withdrawal is essential: protection. The awakened Stoic knows that virtue is fragile when first discovered, like a flame in the wind. To keep it alive, one must shield it until it grows strong enough to withstand storms. To remain in noisy, vice-driven environments too early is to risk snuffing out the flame. That is why so many disappear at the peak of their awakening. They are not abandoning the world, they are protecting their flame. And once it grows into an unshakable fire, they can re-enter the world without fear of extinguishment. Here is the loop you must hold on to. Disappearance is never final. The hermit phase is a stage, not a destination. Marcus Aurelius could not leave Rome, but he retreated inward to keep his reason intact. Seneca was exiled, yet used that exile to write works that shaped philosophy for centuries. Epictetus was a slave, yet he used his chains as training for freedom of the soul. In each case, retreat became the condition for contribution. So too with the stoically awake today. They vanish from the noise, not to remain silent, but to prepare words, actions, and examples that can only be born in silence. And this leads to the next great revelation. When they return, they never return the same. They do not rejoin the unconscious crowd. They come back as guides, healers, and examples. They step into the margins of society, not its center, because the center demands masks while the margins allow authenticity. Stay with me, because in the final section we'll see how this return unfolds and why the quiet disappearance of stoically awake people may be the eerie thing that saves society in the long run. So what happens after the disappearance? Do the stoically awake vanish forever, leaving the rest of society to stumble in darkness? History and philosophy suggest otherwise. The Stoics have always taught that true wisdom cannot remain hidden. It eventually finds its way back into the world, but it returns transformed. When the awakened re-enter, they no longer play by society's rules. They don't chase prestige, they don't beg for approval, and they don't dilute their truth for the comfort of others. Instead, they reappear on the margins, quietly, steadily, living examples of virtue in action. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." This is precisely what the disappeared return as, living embodiments of Stoic truth. They may no longer fill boardrooms or dominate social networks, but they shape lives in more lasting ways, through example, through writings, through teaching in small circles, through the silent force of presence. One woman who stepped away from a glittering career in entertainment later became a mentor to young seekers, guiding them not with slogans but with hard-earned wisdom. She had disappeared at the height of her fame, choosing solitude over applause. To the public, she was forgotten. To those few she guided, she was unforgettable. This is the paradox of Stoic return. It is invisible to the masses, but invaluable to the few. Epictetus said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." That is exactly what the awakened do after their withdrawal. They embody Stoicism so completely that their life becomes the teaching. But why does this matter for you right now? Because if you have felt the urge to step back, if social noise has begun to feel unbearable, if shallow conversations exhaust you, if your soul longs for silence, you are not broken. You are awakening. Your impulse to withdraw is not a flaw to fight, but a call to honor. The Stoics would tell you this: disappear not in bitterness, but in clarity. Use your solitude to strengthen your reason, to cultivate your virtue, to master your passions. Build your inner citadel until no storm can shake it. For when you return, and you will return not as the same person, but as someone who carries light in a world obsessed with shadows. Society may never notice this return, it may never applaud or reward it, but Stoicism has never been about applause. It is about freedom, the freedom to live in accordance with nature, to master your inner world, to act with justice, courage, temperance, and wisdom regardless of the crowd. Seneca reminded us, "If you live in harmony with nature, you will never be poor. If you live according to opinion, you will never be rich." The disappearance of the stoically awake is not poverty. It is the richest kind of preparation. It is the silence before the truth. It is the pause before the right action. And here's the final truth I want you to remember. The disappearance is not abandonment. It is evolution. Those who withdraw are not fleeing society, but pioneering the future it will one day need. They build the quiet spaces where authentic living is still possible. They guard the flame of wisdom when the winds of distraction rage. They become the invisible architects of the next age of consciousness. And if you feel called to follow this path, do not resist it. You are stepping into an ancient tradition walked by Marcus Aurelius in his private writings, by Seneca in exile, by Epictetus in chains. To disappear is not to lose. It is to align with truth. So, as you finish this video, I leave you with a challenge. Do not fear solitude. Do not cling to noise. If the call to withdraw has reached your soul, honor it. Use it. Transform in it. And when the time comes, return not as a participant in society's illusions, but as a bearer of truth. For in the end, that is the role of the stoically awake, to disappear when noise threatens virtue, and to return when silence has made them unshakable.